Welcome to Random Movie Reviews. I'm Nathan, and today I'll be talking about Natural Born Killers. So the most viewed video I have on this channel, with well over 300,000 views at this point, is a radio snippet I found of Quentin Tarantino on the Opie and Anthony show circa 2009, around the time he was promoting Death Proof. And the snippet contained a question to Quentin Tarantino about why he disliked Natural Born Killers.
Here's a question I have for you, too. What about Natural Born Killers did you not like that Oliver Stone did with it? Because you wrote that, right?
Yeah. Well, basically that he rewrote my script. That's first, foremost, and kind of you can stop right there.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
For anyone who hasn't seen that, I'll make sure to put it in the description below. It's just a little 3 minutes in length. But he essentially says that he hated the fact that his script got rewritten in the first place, and that it got rewritten so significantly that it didn't really match the same story that he wrote originally. He said that he ended up not watching the movie after seeing the I Love Mallory sequence. He turned it off and just never watched it ever again. I don't know if that's where he is now, if he still hasn't seen the movie in its entirety, but he clearly hated what Oliver Stone did with the movie. What's interesting is that a lot of the comments in that video are very polarizing, in that either they A, agree with Tarantino and think that Natural Born Killers is a terrible, pretentious, annoying movie, or B, that Tarantino's an idiot, all of his movies suck, and that Natural Born Killers is a movie that's so good that he could never make a movie like that. And there really is no middle ground. A lot of the comments kind of fall under those two categories. I guess I'm one of the rarities out there who both loves Quentin Tarantino and loves Natural Born Killers, but that was not always the case. When I first watched Natural Born Killers, it was around the time that I was discovering Quentin Tarantino and watching all of his movies and really loving them, and then going on to the movies that he wrote but he didn't direct. This one, sort of. I mean, he didn't really write it. He came up with the concept of it, and it got heavily rewritten. And then the other one being True Romance, which is a movie review that I did for this channel, so for anyone interested in that, I'll put it in the description as well. When I saw True Romance the first time, I absolutely loved it, and it's still one of my favorite movies today. I think that movie is amazing, and it's one of my favorite things that Tarantino's ever done. But when I watched Natural Born Killers, it was so different from not just True Romance or any of Tarantino's other work, but it was just like one of the strangest movies I'd ever seen at that point. And I didn't really know what to make of it. There are elements of the movie that I liked, but there were other elements that were just like, it just felt weird and chaotic, and I just had a difficulty connecting with the film overall. I ended up revisiting the film really not that long ago. It was at some point last year. My buddy brought up, he's like, hey, have you watched Natural Born Killers that came out with the 4K? That's what this is, by the way. I was like, you know what? I remember watching that movie back in high school like once or twice, and it not really connecting with me. And I was like, you know what? It's been so long, and my taste in movies has changed in many ways. So I was like, well, let's just give it another chance. I really, really loved it, and I think the reason it connected with me so much more as an adult is the fact that, A, I love satires. I just like movies that are really over the top and absurd, but have a message at the core of them. And that is exactly what this movie is. I mean, Natural Born Killers can be categorized in a couple different ways. It can be categorized as a serial killer movie, as a crime drama. In some regards, it could be characterized as a psychological horror movie, certainly an experimental movie, but it is first and foremost a satire above everything else. This movie is absurd and over the top and chaotic for a very specific reason, and it is to illustrate the sensationalism that the media thrives on when it comes to exploiting and showcasing real-world violence, and doing so in a way that's meant to be like popcorn entertainment to the people who consume it on a daily basis. And this movie was made in the mid-90s, came out in 94, and this was during the height of, like, you know, the OJ trial, the Menendez brothers case, and there was the whole Rodney King thing, and that led into the LA riots, and it was just it was a big turning point in media in terms of, oh, this type of shit sells. And you'd have like trash tabloid journalists and television show hosts, exploiting people and their tragedies and their traumas, and also turning serial killers into rock stars. That is 100% what this movie is about. It has a message. I would never fault anybody for not liking this movie, because it is the picture book definition of an acquired taste. Either you're on board with its crazy experimental style, what I like to describe as a feature-length version of Willy Wonka's boat ride, but with serial killers. You're either on board with that or you're not at all. And you know what? I completely understand that. And I speak from a stance where I used to be a person who's like, I don't like the style of this movie. It's too much. Now I really appreciate it. There's a lot of things to go over, but before I do that, I'll just give a brief overview of the plot real quick. So the movie centers around fictional serial killer couple Mickey and Mallory, played by Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis, respectively. And the movie is kind of like a personal odyssey that follows these two characters. It showcases where they came from, why they became serial killers, how they became involved with each other. And it's all shown through this kaleidoscopic, hellish imagery that never really lets up from beginning to end. They eventually get led down a path where they are taking shrooms in the desert, and this is a massive turning point in their story, where they're taking shrooms with this Native American gentleman. They're having a very spiritual journey and experience, and they end up killing this Native American man, and it's the first time that they've killed somebody in the movie where they actually feel quite remorseful, and it ends up being a real huge turning point for them personally. While all of this stuff is happening, we're seeing how the media is reacting to Mickey and Mallory, seeing them have so much infamy that they eventually turn into celebrities. We see people obsessing over them like teenagers do over rock stars. The journalist that is on their tail and is looking to get an exclusive interview with them is the tabloid Australian journalist Wayne Gale, played hilariously and amazingly by Robert Downey Jr. All of this coalesces into a over-the-top, insane final act where Mickey and Mallory are in prison, and after Mickey's personal one-on-one interview with Wayne Gale happens, a riot starts off in the prison, and Mickey and Mallory see this as an opportunity to escape from the prison and essentially start over a new life together while they're not being serial killers anymore. And that's pretty much the general story. And like I said, it is first and foremost a satire. It satirizes the media. It satirizes how media portrays serial killers and how it portrays violence. And one thing I really noticed upon my rewatch of this movie was that all of the violent sequences in this film is not realistic at all. None of the violence feels grounded or mature. It feels super over the top, cartoony, comic book-ish a little bit. I got a lot of comic book vibes watching this movie. I mean, there's these animated sequences that kind of give the film that kind of vibe to begin with, but the way that violence is shot, I mean, if you just look at the opening sequence alone, where, you know, Mickey and Mallory are at the diner and they're killing the rednecks that are harassing them and sexually harassing Mallory. Just the way that whole, and then they just end up going on a rampage and killing everybody in there. But just the way that scene is filmed, you know, the scene where the bullet stops before it shoots that lady in the head, or that slow motion moving of the knife. Like, there's no violent sequence in this movie that is all realistic. It's like the polar opposite of the way Stone portrayed violence in movies like Platoon, for example, where it's like, that was very grounded, that was very serious, that was meant to look realistic. In this movie, none of the violence is meant to be that realistic, and I think that goes into the overall tone of the movie, of showing how violence is sensationalized through the lens of media. And the movie doesn't just comment on how violence is portrayed in the news media specifically, but how violence is portrayed in film and television. And there's even a sequence where Mickey is watching TV and Scarface is on the TV, a movie that Oliver Stone wrote, and he's kind of criticizing himself, and he's bringing up questions on whether or not, you know, violence in film, in TV, in the media, do all of this contribute to violence in the real world, and whether or not you agree with that or not. That is an interesting question to ask, and it's worth exploring, and I think this movie does so in a way that's very effective. The other thing that really stood out to me was that crucial point in our character's story of Mickey and Mallory when they take shrooms, and it's meant to be a spiritual experience that kind of almost exercises their inner demons in a way. It kind of shows them the evil that is boiling inside them and the disease that they have. And it clearly a theme, both visually in this movie and thematically in the depth of the story, is that of psychedelics. I mean, Oliver Stone is pro psychedelics. He took psychedelics while editing this movie. Fun little fact: this movie took a little over 50 days to shoot, which is pretty short for making a movie, and almost a year to edit, which is very long for editing a movie. But when you watch the movie and you see the way it's edited, you can see why it took so long. And the movie is just meant to be a psychedelic experience that satirizes serial killers, it satirizes the media, but it also has a core. And that core is Mickey and Mallory and their development throughout the story. And that scene where they drop shrooms in the desert really stood out to me. It's like, oh, I see. So Oliver Stone actually wants to like try to redeem these characters in some way. And then that kind of leads to the ending, where the last act of this movie is absolutely insane. And it is the strongest element of the movie in terms of how the media sensationalizes violence. It's the scene, where Mickey and Mallory are escaping the prison while there's a riot going on. And the news anchor lady's like, we'll go to Wayne now. Wayne, what's going on there? And the way they're showcasing it, he's like, it's carnage and mayhem. And they're making it look exciting and fun and visceral. It's like, that's what the media does. And the older I've gotten, the more disdain I have for the media as a whole. And it's something that really kind of sickens me. And I think because I have such a hatred for the media, that's why I love this movie so much, because it turns the media into complete, utter buffoons. There's another great moment, a great satirical moment, where during the whole prison mayhem thing, they're like, we're going to cut to a commercial. And then Oliver Stone shows like a full commercial of the Polar Bear Coca-Cola commercial. Hey, I'm having a Coca-Cola. I'm a polar bear. And then it goes right back to the mayhem. And I was like, oh my God, that's perfect. That perfectly highlights the soullessness of the media landscape. Got to talk about the performances. Both Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis are just fantastic in this movie. On pretty much every level, their chemistry is so good. And Juliette Lewis in particular, holy Lord. I just love her in every movie. Like every movie I see her in, she just fucking delivers. You know what I mean? She doesn't hold back. She is fully committed. And in this movie, she's certainly committed to being an insane person, and it comes off as way too convincing. But you also I like Mallory. I sympathize with Mallory too. And that's the other thing about this movie, is that Oliver Stone does something pretty risky in trying to humanize these two serial killer characters by showing the audience where they came from. And that's where we get to the infamous I Love You, Mallory sitcom spoof sequence, which is a sequence that made Tarantino stop watching the movie. I love that sequence. I think that sequence is quite brilliant. It is a beautifully disturbing juxtaposition between family sitcoms and how family sitcoms have problems, and those problems are often humorous. Well, here is the inversion of that, where the problems our characters are facing are downright despicable and cruel and really, really heartbreaking, because it's centered in truth and reality. There are people out there who have suffered childhoods as disturbing and heartless as this, and it really makes you sympathize with Mallory's character. And like I said, the juxtaposition makes her story feel that much more disturbing. And it can also be looked at as a way true crime turns heartbreaking stories about tragic people into fun, exciting entertainment. It can be looked on that level as well. The cast as a whole is pretty sensational. I mean, you also got Tom Sizemore playing a psychotic police officer, detective, who's arguably even more crazy and sinister than Mickey and Mallory. I think that's an interesting juxtaposition. There's probably some satirical underlinings with his character as well that Oliver Stone's trying to convey. Like I said, Robert Downey Jr. is fantastic. Tommy Lee Jones is going full Joel Schumacher Two-Face in this movie in some points, and I love it when Tommy Lee Jones gets crazy. It's always fun to watch. Rodney Dangerfield in a performance that is completely unforgettable and really gets under your skin. But all of the performances across the board are just fantastic, and they totally fit the over-the-top, crazy tone of this movie. I don't fault anybody for not liking the movie, because it is the definition of an acquired taste, and if you hate it and it doesn't resonate with you, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's a hard movie to take, not just in terms of the subject matter, and you're dealing with really dark stuff, and the violence is really over the top and crazy, but also just the way that information is being delivered to the viewer is it's like getting your wig blown back. It is meant to be a acid trip from hell. I do really love this movie. And I am very curious to see the comments on this video because this is one of those movies where it gets reaction out of people. So let me know what you guys think about Natural Born Killers. Do you love it? Do you hate it? Put it in the comments below. And as always, thank you guys for watching.